Welcome. Grace and peace to you. Thank you for tuning in today. In this episode, we're going to tackle Jonah, chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. So, without further ado, go ahead, grab your Bibles, and let's get started. Jonah, chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. As Yogi Berra, the late great catcher for the New York Yankees, once said, it's like déjà vu all over again. The beginning of chapter 3, as you can see, mirrors the beginning of chapter 1. However, because of Jonah's dramatic experience at sea, I think he now seems a little more inclined to carry out his mission. And in case all the excitement had caused Jonah's memory to slip, in verse 2, the Lord reiterates that assignment to him, this time with the added nuance, the message that I tell you, which indicates God's words would come to Jonah once he got to Nineveh. Indeed, chapter 3 is the great reboot to our story. Unfortunately, many today read meaning into verse 1, heavily emphasizing the phrase the second time to infer a second chance, and thus suggesting that the book of Jonah is all about second chances. I'm sure you've all heard the story or the message preached like, Jonah gets a second chance, so can you, or the Lord our God is a God of second chances. Of course, these ideas are true in a sense. I just don't think they are the moral of Jonah's story, and let me give you two reasons why. First, chapter 3, verse 1 states, the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time. This simply means that God reiterated Jonah's mission to him after Jonah refused to carry out said mission the first time. Moreover, as we reread the Lord's command to Jonah in verse 2, we are met with back-to-back imperative verbs, which stress the urgency of Jonah's mission to go to Nineveh, that great city. The phrase, that great city, indicates that Nineveh was important to God because the people there were important to him. Thus, it was essential that Jonah should carry out God's message to them immediately. This is the message the biblical author is conveying. So perhaps this passage is less about Jonah's second chance to live up to his calling and more about the nature and character of God, his faithfulness to his plan, and his compassion for the Ninevites. Second, it would be a mistake to assume that God works in the lives of those who rebel against him exactly like he did with Jonah. Neither Jonah nor his circumstances are typical, especially for modern Christians living under a different covenant. It's important to remember that Jonah was an 8th century BC prophet from the northern kingdom of Israel. Prophets in the ancient world, both Hebrew and non-Hebrew alike, were spokespersons for the gods they served. They announced the message of the deity for their contemporary audience, and that message was usually one of impending judgment. In a nutshell, prophetic oracles usually follow basic cause and effect logic. For example, because of A, if you do not change course ASAP, then B will happen. In this light, it's important to note that throughout the ancient Near East, across ethnic and cultural lines, the office of a prophet was deemed legitimate, and the messages prophets announced were considered as the very words of the gods for whom they spoke. This is why a message from a foreign, obscure Hebrew prophet like Jonah would have been taken seriously by the Ninevites. Moreover, the predominantly polytheistic societies of Jonah's days were very interested in what the gods were thinking and what they were doing. One reason for this curiosity might have been because the gods, although considered more benevolent than people, were also more ruthless and evil. Thus, they were feared because they were petty, unpredictable, and could inflict disaster upon human beings for no apparent reason. This is the view that dominated the religious landscape of Jonah's day. And so it would have been a real eye-opener for Israel's neighbors, struggling to understand the intentions and the temperaments of their gods, to discover that the God of the Hebrews was a God of steadfast love, grace, and mercy. Not to mention, he actually cared about people. Furthermore, the God of the Hebrews had a plan to remedy the effects of sin while drawing all peoples, nations, and tongues into a relationship with himself. Remarkably, the one true God acts in the lives of regular people, and he utilizes them to help him with his plan. Which brings us back to Jonah. One would think Jonah would have been proud to play such an active part in God's plan. But evidently, Jonah saw his vocation as more of a privilege than a responsibility. Moreover, when we come to the end of Jonah's book, we're going to discover that Jonah didn't like God's plan very much. Not to mention, there's really very little evidence to suggest that Jonah truly had a change of heart after the whole whale incident. And so, here at the beginning of chapter 3, Jonah is resigned to the fact that he will go to Nineveh to proclaim God's message to the Ninevites, like it or not. Therefore, I suggest the motif for chapter 3 isn't so much about second chances as it is about how the sovereign creator of the universe loves and cares about people. And despite the best laid plans of mice and men, all of God's plans and purposes will come to fruition. You can count on it. And that fact, my friends, should comfort us all. In closing, I want to pass along to you what I received some time ago from a book written by Dr. Stephen Lennox. Namely, as you read and study the Old Testament, you should continually ask two questions. Number one, what does the text tell me about the character and nature of God? And number two, what does it tell me about God's plan? Trust me, asking these two simple questions will not only enhance your understanding of the Old Testament, but it will enrich your relationship with God as well. Please join me next time when we will conclude chapter 3 of Jonah's book. Until then, may God bless and keep you. If you'd like to take part in the discussion, please feel free to do so in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like and share. And if you haven't done so, please consider subscribing. Thank you.